On September 20th, select theaters around America re-released a film called Whiplash to celebrate its 10-year anniversary. Insufferable film watchers ran to their computers in search of a showing nearby, bought tickets, and paid a visit to Miss Kidman before clocking in on 106 minutes of pure anxiety and ambition. Only the most obnoxious, pretentious, movie-obsessed losers would pay to see a baby-faced Miles Teller get assaulted by the dude from the Farmers Insurance commercials while jazz lingers in the background. My showing was at 7:30. Johnny Utah, I haven't heard that name in ages. He used to turn my pages. When Whiplash came out in 2014, movies were in such a great place. The third Hunger Games movie came out in 2014, which means I was still actively going to movie premieres at midnight. I still have all my ticket stubs from my local theater, going when I was younger. So this is before I was even as obnoxious of a film person as I am now. So this just shows how much fun going to the movies was growing up. Just a lot of movies, it was the best time. Death row meal for me, dog, is a movie theater popcorn and a Dr. Pepper. And I was reminded of that time when I went to see Whiplash. It was a full theater of people excited to hear jazz music and surround sound. Seb from La La Land would have been proud. He probably would have cried. The movie starts and we see Andrew Neiman, a freshman at a prestigious music school in New York, practicing his drums. We're introduced to the terrifying music teacher Fletcher, and it's obvious Andrew wants to impress him. He's full of hope and he's hungry. You can just tell that he really, really wants this. And as the audience, as a viewer, we're like, hell yeah, this is why we come to theaters, to be inspired, to feel empathy, to escape. Movies matter in a place like this. Yeah. And Andrew works his ass off. He impresses Fletcher, he gets into a selective ensemble, and begins getting emotionally and physically abused by Fletcher. And we see how Andrew grapples with what it takes for him to be successful in this band, and what it takes for him to reach towards his goal of being one of the greats. He breaks up with his girlfriend, he toughens his skin, and he decides he will do whatever it takes to be successful. And that's why we were in that theater 10 years after release. It's because we love seeing great stories and we love seeing them collectively together. But this video isn't about Whiplash. I mean, it is and it isn't. We contain multitudes, okay? So it is, but it's also about you, and it's also about me. And it's also about Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola's Megalopolis, placed in near-empty theaters, is the title of a recent New York Times article. Megalopolis is Francis Ford Coppola's newest film, which I want to keep calling Metropolis because that would actually make sense. The budget for Megalopolis was $140 million. Opening weekend, it made $4 million. If you're normal, you maybe don't know that Francis Ford Coppola is the same person who directed The Godfather or Apocalypse Now. Okay, so he's top shit, all right? He's legit. This movie flopped majorly. I highly recommend this article by Brooks Barnes, even if that is the most rich, affluent, white name I've ever heard in my life. Rich and affluent mean the same thing. Francis Ford Coppola made The Godfather. Brooks Brothers and Barnes & Nobles made Brooks Barnes. Anyways, how things usually work, especially for bigger art house films, is that these movies will be played at film festivals, so Cannes, Venice, TIFF, any of those, and then they will get picked up by a distributor. So that'll be something like Lionsgate or Warner Brothers or Neon, something like that. And then as they're picked up, then they're either going to be shown in theaters or put on streaming. Megalopolis tried to follow this path, but struggled from day one. Not only did Coppola have to put a lot of his own money into the making of the film, no distributor wanted to pick up the film. Lionsgate eventually picked it up for a fee, so it sounds like Coppola was responsible for a lot of the marketing and distribution fees, which are around roughly $20 million for this film. After making it into 2,000 theaters, this movie made $4 million opening weekend, which is less than a 3% return. Since I filmed this video, a similar demise happened for the Joker, Folie à Deux. I don't know if that's how you say it, Folie à Deux. Folie à Deux. Okay, anyways, the Joker, Folie à Deux. It had a budget of $200 million and made $37.6 million opening weekend, which is an 18.8% return. As of October 18th, it has made $166 million globally, meaning it still hasn't met its budget yet. This is emphasized by the distinct difference in profit from the first Joker movie, which ended up making over $1 billion globally and had a budget of $55 million. This movie had huge stars like Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, but this was just not enough to counteract the fact that this movie was a musical, which was just a weird choice in my opinion. Maybe they thought the Joker's audience was wide enough due to the success of the first movie and that everyone would just go and see it. But I think the typical audience for movies like the Joker are primarily men, and the type of men who like superhero or anti-hero movies like Venom and Deadpool and Batman. And I don't think there is much overlap between these people, those who would see those movies and people who like musicals. Except me, maybe. I would go see both, except the Joker freaks me out. So you will not catch me at the Joker Folie à Deux. I think the question here is, can filmmakers still take risks like this and get a theatrical release? Megalopolis was a huge artsy risk that required a knowledge of Roman history to deeply understand it, and The Joker 2 was a huge risk by making it a musical, which apparently came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream, which, like, honestly, that checks. And both these movies failed at the box office. If these movies don't have a home in cinemas anymore, do they have a home anywhere other than maybe smaller art house theaters or the Criterion channel? Because I don't think they have a home in streaming necessarily. Streaming is almost always lower budget movies to make way for the constant ingestion of content. A lot of the higher budget movies right now come from content that was originally shown in theaters, and then they eventually make their way to streaming services after. But if these movies are considered high risk and they aren't put in movie theaters, will they be put anywhere? Will they be made at all? Now you may be saying, Cassie, we were talking about Whiplash, now we're talking about Megalopolis. We know you've been gone for a few months, but you need to tighten up your script. But I ask you, dear viewer, to think a little critically, because that does happen to be the whole point of this video. Is cinema dead? Could a movie like Megalopolis have survived in the age of Whiplash only 10 years ago? A big difference in cinema now versus then is how movies are released. Whiplash, for example, premiered October 2014 and was in theaters until March 2015. That's 6 months in theaters, and some movies could even be in theaters for a year. The typical window for movies now is 2.5 to 3 months. And the way this is happening is the movie's hitting almost all theaters at once, whereas before, in the time of Whiplash, they would premiere in a few theaters and slowly would expand over time as the movie got more popular. But that's not happening anymore. There's no longer time for this cult following, okay? The cycle moves too fast, motherfucker. Megalopolis, you gotta get out of the way after 6 is about to hit theaters. And so far, this has largely been a discussion about theaters, but I don't think we can talk about the death of cinema without talking about streaming. Many films these days don't get a theatrical release, they go directly to streaming, or if they do get a theatrical release, they're not in theaters very long before they hit streaming. For example, in 2020, Universal made a deal with AMC Theaters that movies could be shown on streaming 17 days after they premiered at theaters. Okay, that's only 3 weeks. That's less than 3 weeks. So why would I go to a theater and pay $20, because tickets these days are like $20, to go see a movie one time when I could just wait 17 days and it's going to be on my streaming service that I'm already paying for? All right, but this is talking about movies that have a high enough budget and enough thought put into them to even make it to the big screen. Streaming services are chocked with absolute garbage, dog. So much content on streaming services are only expected to stay trendy for a very short amount of time. And if they don't get an instant following, they get pushed to the recesses of the streaming service, never to be seen again, kind of like Bing Bong and Inside Out. I think even worse, movies and TV shows are now being made with the idea that the viewer is not giving them their full attention, that they're also on a second screen or, God forbid, a third screen. That's why TV shows and movies repeat themselves so much. They don't trust you enough to have heard them the first time. Okay, they're thinking that you're paying closer attention to that TikTok, or you're rereading messages from Kyle. Let Kyle go, babe. And this kind of brings me to brain rot as well. We need to get a fucking grip. Over the past few months, I've been bookmarking a bunch of TikToks I've seen on brain rot and being chronically online or needing multiple screens at once, okay? And it hasn't been a small amount of videos I've seen. One of the top things I've noticed with an increase in rhetoric around being chronically online is this massive decrease in originality. I feel like we're dissolving regional dialect for anyone who is on TikTok. Everyone sounds the same. This could easily have passed already by the time I get this video up, but right now, every single TikTok comment section I open contains like a few of the exact same comments on every single video. So everyone I see, it's gonna be, who is this diva? Mama, there's a blank behind you. You can never make me hate blank blank. Do you do weddings? Do you do birthday parties? It's like on every single one. It's like, guys, please come up with something else, like anything else. And I get it. I do think there's something very comforting about sharing something collectively, but what is the point if we're all the same? It's like, dog, a lot of us haven't been in middle school in years. Like, we should know by now. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. We should have learned this. The other side of TikTok and this chronically onlineness is the attention span issue, which connects directly to the death of cinema. I've talked about this before on my channel, so it's obviously something that haunts me. We are ruining things for ourselves, and I do it too. So one thing about me is I'm a massive fan of Big Brother. So that was TikTok rhetoric itself. I'm a massive fan of Big Brother. In this show, it's kind of like Love Island. It's on 3 days a week. It's on all the time. So if you aren't relatively caught up, you're at a huge chance of seeing spoilers. So it's kind of best if you watch on time, all right? The show's on CBS, all right? So you have to watch commercials if you're going to watch it on network television. So every time you watch Big Brother, you're watching commercials, which means every single time I'm watching Big Brothers, I'm watching TikToks on commercial breaks. And it's genuinely an addiction. It's terrible. It's like I can't sit through like 3 minutes of commercials. I'm like, this is boring as shit. I need to open up my phone. The thought of doing like menial things, it's like, okay, how do I integrate watching TikToks, watching YouTube videos, listening to music into this task? It's like we can't do a single thing. We can't focus on one thing. It's like I'm fist fighting with silence at all hours. And that sucks. It sucks. It's making us stupider because we're not focusing on one thing, so we're not mentally rehearsing it for attention. We tell people we read something about X, but really what we mean is we heard somebody on TikTok talk about it. I saw a TikTok of someone who was confusing what they were seeing on TikTok and it was blurring with their real life. And no, I'm not talking about shifting. So how are we supposed to be enjoying stories? How are we supposed to be enjoying movies if we're not giving them the time of day? If we're constantly watching movies in a setting that has a lot of distractions, and even worse, we're the ones who are providing the distractions. We can't do anything for a period of time without constant stimuli. We're so addicted to the internet and there's not a great enough incentive for us to stop, so we don't. And if you're self-respecting and you've seen Whiplash, then you know the movie doesn't end when Andrew starts finding success in the band. Andrew is so obsessed, dare I say addicted, with doing well in the band that all he's doing every day is drumming. He literally drags his mattress and his alarm clock into the practice room. That's all he spends time doing is practicing. He gets so obsessed and abused that after getting in a car crash on the way to perform in a concert, he crawls out of the wreck and limps his way to the venue. With blood dripping down his head, he begins performing before his injuries get so bad he has to stop. He snaps and attacks Fletcher, the person who has caused him all this pain, who has stripped him of being anything but one thing, a drummer, someone addicted to being seen as good enough. Andrew gets kicked out of the school, and Fletcher gets fired after his actions anonymously come to light. Andrew is forced to move on, and he starts a new fulfilling life where he can focus on more than one thing without the constant beat of the drum, until he runs into Fletcher again. Fletcher, not knowing it was Andrew who blew the whistle, invites him to perform in his jazz band. By now, Andrew is reformed from his time away from his mentor, and he says, I'm going to give it another try. But when he goes to perform, he finds out the invitation was just a ruse, and he was not given the correct music, so he's playing the wrong beats compared to everyone else. Fletcher knew it was Andrew who turned him in all along. Andrew, embarrassed in front of some of the most important people in jazz music, is faced with a choice. Sink or swim, bitch. And we're faced with the same dilemma. Cinema was once young and fresh and constantly evolving, excited for its new beginning at a fancy music school in New York. It found success, months in theaters where fans could come back and back. They might even come back 10 years later to see their favorite movies on the big screen again. Cinema is dying. A key form of storytelling is succumbing to remakes and sequels. Millions of hours of brain-dead content on streaming services. An internet-addicted society who can't focus or form their own opinions. We're letting Fletcher tell us what to do. We're letting him win. So we, the audience, filmmakers, studios, we need to decide if we're going to let these things beat us. I haven't talked about it in this video, but even streaming services, even these studios aren't safe from the decline that the current model is creating. Are we going to follow the path in front of us that recycles content over and over and completely removes creativity? Or are we going to pick up the damn drumsticks and improvise? Are we going to make something new? Earlier I said it wasn't about Whiplash, but I lied. It is about Whiplash. It's all about Whiplash. We have to start caring about stories again.